step into the shadows of a dwelling without chandeliers or marble, where no grand echoes of banquets linger, only the soft crackle of a hearth, the faint sweetness of straw, and walls that have absorbed centuries of whispered lives. Crossing the low threshold of such a house meant entering the world of the ordinary medieval family. These structures were never built to impress a passing stranger. They were designed with one goal in mind: enduring the seasons. Across the English countryside and through much of Europe, the silhouette repeated itself in village after village, a simple rectangle of timber and clay, capped by a sharply sloping roof. Their walls seemed to breathe with the changing weather. Some were framed in oak beams, their skeletons exposed on the outside, filled with woven sticks plastered with clay, straw, and even animal dung. This wattle and daub, though humble, bound families to their homes for generations. In regions where stone was plentiful, rough blocks mortared with lime stood in place of clay, patched with whatever the builder could salvage. Evidence of these homes appears even in the Bayeux tapestry, stitched almost a millennium ago. Its threadbare houses show doors set in the centre, steep roofs pitched to defy the endless rain, no sign of glass windows to brighten the interiors. Their roofs were often thatched with straw or reeds, catching the summer sun in a crown of gold, then darkening through the winter into a weathered grey. To medieval villagers, this appearance was not shameful. It was the ordinary face of shelter. Peasants did not measure wealth in ornaments or marble columns, but in the security of a roof that did not leak, walls that did not fall, and a fire that could be kept alive through long nights. Passing travellers may have found such homes unremarkable, yet for those who lived within, every timber held the weight of family stories, carried from one generation to the next. First impressions of a house were practical. Did the roof sag under rain? Did the walls hold back the wind? Was the door stout enough to keep wolves, stray dogs, or thieves from slipping in? Beauty, when noticed, was quiet. It lived in the rhythm of dark beams against pale plaster, the faint lime wash brightening a wall, or the smell of new thatch before winter storms set in. Look more closely, and the structure tells its story. In half-timbered houses, beams were never hidden away. They stood proudly, a black grid marking the house's spine. Between them, lighter panels of plaster created a patchwork that was both function and form. This was architecture born of scarcity and skill. Each oak beam was cut, shaped, and joined by hand, locked together with wooden pegs. No iron nails were needed. The plaster was smeared into place, sometimes whitewashed to brighten the gloom of long winters. Where families had means, decoration softened utility. Carved patterns traced the beams. Paint coloured the plaster. The house became not just a shelter, but a statement. Quiet artistry folded into necessity. Manuscripts from the 15th century, like the Book of Love, depict wooden windows set deep into the walls, small as a loaf of bread. They opened on hinges, or in poorer homes were covered only by shutters of raw planks. Light was precious. Glass was a rarity reserved for churches and manor halls. Most villagers relied on panes of scraped horn or oiled cloth stretched thin to admit a milky light while keeping out the cold. The doorway was small, forcing most to bow as they entered. Its lintel of heavy wood sagged smooth with centuries of footsteps passing beneath. Inside, beams did more than support. They divided space, held lofts, and offered pegs for tools. Drying herbs or clothes hung near the fire. This style was more than construction. It declared social standing. The half-timber house spoke. I endure, but I am not noble. I stand firm, but I do not rule. It was the middle ground between the mud hut and the stone castle. From a distance, a thatched roof could look idyllic, a golden slope rising above hedges, catching evening sunlight like strands of spun flax. Yet this beauty was accidental. Thatch was chosen because it was cheap, light, and available. Reeds and straw could be cut from local fields, tied into bundles, layered thickly across rafters. Its insulating power was remarkable. Cool in summer, warm in winter, breathing just enough to keep a rot at bay. But this crown demanded vigilance. Over years, rain pressed the straw flat, mice burrowed in, birds plucked away fibres for their nests. A roof left untended would sag and leak. Skilled thatchers had to strip and bind new layers so water flowed cleanly off. Fire was a constant danger. A stray spark from the hearth could leap to the eaves, and in dry summers a blaze could race from one roof to the next before a bucket could be lifted. Regulations tried to limit risk. Chimneys were required to rise high, and houses spaced apart. But in crowded towns, a single ember often meant a street lost to flames. Manuscripts from the 15th century, such as Le Ménagier de Paris, show roofs fraying, plaster crumbling, makeshift wooden repairs hammered into place. A reminder that a peasant's battle was not only with hunger, but with his own roof and walls. The thatched crown was fragile, both blessing and burden. Step inside, and the heart of the house opens before you. A single hall, open and unpartitioned, serving as kitchen, dining room, workshop and bedroom in one. This was the reality before chimneys and upper floors became common. Smoke curled from the hearth, drifting upward to escape through a hole in the roof or a small vent. It hung in the air, stinging eyes, blackening rafters, yet it also preserved. Smoke deterred insects, dried timber, kept food from spoiling. In manuscript illuminations we glimpsed daily life. Pots suspended from iron hooks, stools gathered around the fire, herbs dangling from beams. Every inch of wall carried something useful. Tools, baskets, shelves for the few treasures a family could keep. Privacy barely existed. Children played underfoot. Chickens sometimes shared the room. In harsh weather, goats or sheep might be brought inside for warmth. Mats of straw unrolled for sleep were rolled up again to clear space for work. The open hall forced togetherness. The same table bore dough in the morning, mending in the afternoon and supper at night. A chest held clothing in summer, grain in winter, and sometimes served as a bench. Work, play and rest folded into the same smoky chamber. In such spaces, life was not divided by doors and corridors. The home was one shared body. Each member was its heartbeat. Light inside a medieval home was always a fragile visitor. The windows, if they existed at all, were rarely larger than a man's spread hand, framed in thick wood and set deep into the wall. In the poorest houses these were little more than shuttered holes. Planks swung shut against rain and wind, leaving the room in darkness. Families with a little more wealth stretched thin sheets of horn, scraped until translucent, or used oiled cloth to admit a dim, clouded glow. True glass, tiny diamond panes bound with strips of lead, was reserved for churches and manor halls. For most, daylight slipped in only through the open door or the smoke hole above the fire. On winter mornings, the interior dissolved into shadow. The packed earth floor held the scent of damp soil. Walls exhaled smoke and plaster dust. The mingled smell of herbs, wool and drying food filled the gloom. Ventilation was crude. A louver in the roof or a slit high on the wall allowed some smoke to drift out, but drafts always followed. In summer, they brought relief. In winter, they stole warmth, dragging the breath of the hearth into the cold night. Light, so precious, shaped every rhythm. Work needing clear sight, mending clothes, spinning thread, carving wood, clustered near the doorway while the sun was high. As dusk drew in, the household gathered close around the fire, the centre glowing red against the shadows. If the family could afford it, the flame was joined by the steady yellow of tallow candles or a simple oil lamp. In wealthier homes, the faint shine of brass or pewter caught and scattered this glow. In poorer ones, darkness clung stubbornly to the corners, relieved only by the restless pulse of the hearth. The hearth itself was more than fire. It was the anchor of the home, the source of warmth, light, and security in a world where a hard winter could mean death. Often set against one wall, or in older houses directly in the centre, the hearth smouldered from morning until night, a living thing to be guarded. Its smoke blackened rafters, its glow reflected faintly from plastered walls. Cooking pots hung on iron hooks, spits roasted small cuts of meat. Flat stones or griddles baked cakes of oats or rye. Bellows waited nearby, ready to coax coals back to life. Kindling was stacked close, within easy reach. Manuscripts like the Hours of Catherine of Cleves show these domestic corners. Kettles steaming over flames, shelves stacked with pottery, stools pulled close to the glow. Such pictures remind us that the hearth was not just utility, it was a magnet for life. On cold evenings, the family drew near. Stories were told, tools mended, bread shared. The rituals were small, stirring the pot, banking the embers, whispering before sleep, but they bound people together. Its position dictated the map of life. Where the heat reached, people worked. Where the glow touched, people sat. Where its warmth failed, no one lingered. In many ways, the hearth was the invisible boundary of comfort, the true heartbeat of the house. To lose it, to let the fire die, was to lose the home's soul. And so the flame was passed from hand to hand, generation to generation, as faithfully as land or tools. Beds in this world were corners, not rooms. For the poorest families, sleep meant rolling out sacks of straw or wool-stuffed mattresses on the floor close to the fire, then rolling them away again in the morning. The wealthier raised their beds on wooden frames with carved posts and curtains to trap warmth, the mattress layered with linen sheets and wool blankets. Some slept communally in the same bed. Parents with children, older siblings in lofts beneath the roof, youngest ones close to the fire. Privacy was scarce. Warmth mattered more. Winter nights often meant sleeping fully clothed, hoods pulled low, hands wrapped in wool. Bedclothes betrayed status. Coarse wool and animal skins covered the poor, while dyed blankets and feather-stuffed mattresses softened the beds of the well-off. The bed frame itself doubled as storage, with chests at the foot holding clothing, tools, or valuables. Beds were not only for sleeping, they were spaces for nursing infants, telling stories, even conducting quiet business with neighbours who dropped by. In a single open hall, the bed became the one private comfort in a public room. Furniture was modest in both number and shape. Every item had to earn its keep. A sturdy table anchored the centre, serving as place for meals, a bench for kneading bread, or a surface for sewing. Benches or stools, roughly cut, lined the walls. A high-backed chair, when it appeared, marked the head of the household. Chests were the treasure of the peasant home. Heavy, lockable, able to guard clothing in summer, grain in winter, even a child's blanket at night. Shelves might be set into the walls to hold pottery, tools, or a handful of candles. Baskets woven of reed carried vegetables, wool, or firewood. The wealthier sometimes painted their furniture, carved patterns into the wood, or covered benches with cushions. The poor left theirs bare, surfaces worn smooth from use. Yet even the plainest stool or chest told the story of a family's life. The seat where a mother nursed, the chest carried by a bride to her new home, the table around which generations broke bread. In a world where abundance was rare, these objects became companions. They were not mere possessions, but durable witnesses to years of toil and memory. A medieval house was never only for eating and sleeping, it was also the workshop of the family. Tools crowded the walls and corners, each one a lifeline. A spinning wheel, polished by constant use, turned wool into thread. Bundles of carded fibre waited beside it. A loom, if the household could afford such a luxury, stood upright, consuming space but yielding cloth for clothes, blankets, or trade. Men's tools leaned against the beams, axes, saws, adzes, ready to mend fences or shape beams. Knives served everywhere, in kitchen, yard, and workshop. In homes of better means, tools were cared for, oiled and stored against rust. In poorer ones, they hung worn but serviceable, patched again and again. Cooking utensils were just as essential. Iron pots, wooden ladles, baking griddles, mortars for grinding herbs, sieves for grain. Illuminated manuscripts often pictured biblical figures at work, Mary at her spinning wheel, Joseph with his carpenter's tools, reminding medieval families that their own labour mirrored holy labour. Each tool was both necessity and symbol. It spoke of dignity, survival, and skill. In this way, the home became a miniature economy, producing food, clothing, and goods not only for the family's use but sometimes for sale or barter. Every hammer, spindle, and pot told the story of who lived here, what they made, and how they hoped to endure another year. Gather these details, the smoke-darkened rafters, the curtained bed, the few tools kept with care, and the medieval house becomes more than walls and roof. It becomes a mirror of its people, their values, their position, their resilience. Poverty showed itself in thin thatch, small windows, bare benches. But even in the humblest home, care revealed itself. Swept floors, herbs strung neatly to dry, walls patched against the rain. Wealthier families marked prosperity in quieter ways. A glazed jug on a shelf, a larger bed with a feather pillow, a pane of leaded glass to catch the sun. And still, beneath both poverty and modest prosperity, the aim was the same: survival. These homes sheltered their families against hunger and cold, against storm at night. They defended the fragile thread of life, season after season, century after century. The differences between households revealed themselves in shadow as much as in light. Step into a poorer dwelling and darkness clings to every corner. The only flame is the hearth, its glow bouncing off rough plaster, the rafters above coated in soot from years of smoke. A wealthier neighbour's home, by contrast, may scatter the same firelight across polished pewter, bright pottery, or carefully burnished wood, doubling the glow. The contrast was not dramatic, but subtle. An extra candle here, a cloth-draped table there, enough to signal prosperity without shouting it. Yet for both rich and poor, the fire remained central. It was the pulse around which life circled. The day began with embers coaxed back to flame, the pots suspended again for porridge or stew. It ended with banking the coals, whispering them into sleep beneath ashes so they could be reborn at dawn. To lose the fire was to lose safety itself. Families guarded it as faithfully as land, tools, or inheritance. When it came to sleeping, distinctions again rested in comfort more than form. The poorest unrolled mats near the hearth, wrapped themselves in coarse wool, and drifted to sleep within the same smoky chamber where meals had been cooked hours before. Families with more means retreated behind bed curtains, layers of linen and wool pulled close, feather pillows beneath their heads. Most households slept together, parents and children pressed near for warmth. Loft spaces sometimes held older children, while the youngest nestled closest to the flames. Intimacy and necessity walked hand in hand. Furniture, too, told quiet stories of class. At the heart of every home was a table. Around it, bread was kneaded, tools were mended, and meals were shared. In the poorest houses, this might be no more than rough planks set on trestles, surfaces worn smooth by years of work. In more comfortable homes, linen cloth softened the boards, pewter plates shone faintly in candlelight, and a high-backed chair marked the authority of the household head. Chests guarded possessions, doubling as benches or beds when needed. Shelves, baskets, stools, each object justified its place. Each bore witness to years of use, and everywhere, tools stood ready. In one corner, a spinning wheel creaked as wool was twisted into thread. If fortune allowed, a loom stood tall, a space-consuming frame on which fabric was patiently woven. On the walls hung axes, saws, and knives. essentials for shaping beams, mending fences, or butchering meat. In the kitchen space, iron pots blackened by fire waited to be filled, wooden ladles stirred, mortars ground herbs into powders for food and medicine. Every household was its own workshop, producing what it could, repairing what it must, trading when possible. Illuminated manuscripts of the period often show biblical figures not as lords or kings, but as labourers, Mary spinning, Joseph carving. These depictions reminded medieval eyes that work was sacred, that labour and faith intertwined. Within the home, each tool, no matter how humble, was a symbol of dignity. Taken together, the details weave a picture richer than stone castles or painted churches. A low doorway smoothed by countless hands. Smoke-blackened rafters holding the scent of centuries. A curtained bed, a single chest, a table stained with generations of meals. These were not mere structures, but the physical expression of survival. The poorest homes revealed hardship with every choice. Thin thatch, patched plaster, tiny windows shuttered against storms. Yet even here, care left its mark. Floors swept clean, herbs tied in careful bundles, a corner of tools neatly stored. In households with more comfort, prosperity showed itself through subtleties. A glazed jug catching the firelight, a feather pillow in the bed, a pane of glass glowing like treasure in the wall. Archaeology and manuscript art together correct our modern imagination. Not every peasant dwelt in a crumbling mud hut. By the 15th century, many families had climbed beyond subsistence. They invested in sturdier beams, larger tables, brighter furniture. They decorated walls with simple paints or carved patterns. They owned objects whose purpose was not survival, but comfort. Life was still hard, but its texture was not uniform misery. Still, at every level of wealth, the purpose of the home remained the same. It was a shield against winter and storm, against hunger and night. It was also a stage, hosting the endless small dramas of ordinary life, births, quarrels, reconciliations, meals, stories whispered to children before sleep. Compared to castles of stone, these timber and thatch houses may appear fragile. Few stand today, their materials too perishable to outlast centuries. Yet for those who once lived in them, they were everything. They were repositories of labour, memory and love. Every patched roof bore witness to survival. Every stool, every basket, every darkened beam carried the weight of ordinary human lives. When we look at them now, even in fragments uncovered by archaeologists, we see more than architecture. We see endurance. Castles have survived to tell the stories of kings. But the true heartbeat of the Middle Ages lived here, in these smoky rooms where families gathered, worked and slept together. The measure of a medieval home was never in its walls or roof, but in the lives it sheltered. Its beams creaked with laughter and argument. Its hearth glowed with warmth and hunger alike. Its floors held the weight of tired feet. Its corners cradled the dreams of children. And even now, across centuries, their traces remind us of a simple truth. History is not only in the gilded halls of lords, it lives in the small, smoky houses of villagers, in the tools worn smooth by hands, in the patched thatch that defied another storm. When I imagine these homes, I do not only see timber and clay, I see the heartbeat of an age. Castles endure in stone, but true life unfolded here, in the warmth of a fire, in the quiet of a bed, in the creak of a stool and the smell of straw. Every ordinary beam speaks more honestly about the medieval world than any gilded hall ever could. If you wish to keep wandering through these forgotten corners of the past, follow where history still breathes.